This morning I then want to talk about the joy of music, what music does, what music is, its nature. I don't want to talk about any of that. I want to talk about politics in a very serious way. I want to start by saying, if we could fix three things in education, these are the three things I would fix. The first thing is, I would pay teachers properly. That doesn't happen in this country. And we need to keep that in the forefront of our minds, that we are worthy as teachers to be paid properly. I don't think money fixes everything, but it is important that people are recognised properly, financially, for what they do. The second thing is, I would try to create a circumstance where teachers had more autonomy, where teachers were really autonomous. And the third thing is, I would eliminate standardised testing permanently. We all know about standardised testing. And what do we know about standardised testing? It's a waste of time. We know that the results between 2008 and 2015, what happened in the recent Adelaide, are big, fat re-ed. Nothing happened. Standardised testing is a waste of time. Once we fix music education up in this country, that's the thing we're going for next. Based on the pay, based on what happened then, I should never do anything technical. Anyway, based on the concept of pain, we might attract different levels of people to teaching, and we might hold people longer in teaching. Because teachers burn out at a rate faster than they have ever burned out. Particularly people working in creative arts. And particularly if states adopt the idea that the music teacher can teach drama and dance and visual arts. That is a crazy idea, and it has to stop. We have to fight that. At every level we have to fight that. But if we did pay people, we probably would get fairly bright minds coming in to work, people such as yourselves. Now what separates you is you have a vocation. You would do it anyway, because you wouldn't be here at this conference in school holiday time if you didn't have a vocation, if you didn't have a desire to teach. But we need to broaden that. We need to let people know that were we to reward them properly, that those vocations, there'd be people out there who would love to teach and who would be extremely good at it. Autonomy. If you make a teacher autonomous, you eliminate the need for endless curricula and endless syllabi. Because a well-trained teacher who knows the repertoire, who knows music, who knows what's going on, who knows how to teach, is the best curriculum. The teacher knows best. The teacher knows how to test. It's through testing and teaching we know how to work with children. What do my children need to know? Where do they need to go next? A good teacher tests all the time. And that comes with autonomy. It doesn't happen. You don't get great teaching when you have people constantly looking over your shoulder, waiting for you to tick boxes and waiting for you to fill out endless assessment reports and waiting for you to do thousands of clerical things that have nothing to do with teaching. Yeah. That's true. We have to fight that. And we have to let governments know. We have to let governments know. We have to talk to politicians about it. Talk to local members about education. It is the most important thing a child experiences. The most important thing. Apart from a circumstance at home, whatever that might be. Okay, if we get rid of standardised testing, and my view is that we will, what will happen is we could change the nature of the way a syllabus is perceived, and we could eliminate a lot of the rubbish that's in the primary syllabus particularly, where teachers are asked to do all sorts of ridiculous things that have nothing to do with education. So if a child falls over in the playground and hurts his or her knee on the asphalt, we need asphalt education. And if a child catches his finger in the door, we need door education. And you hear it all the time. The public needs education. That's not education. Education is about working on the child's mind. And the child's mind is worked upon spectacularly when the mind is engaged with arts education, and particularly with music education. And if I were in charge of education, I would mandate the arts subjects in order. And I would say music and dance would be right at the top. Visual arts next, then drama. Now, that is not popular at drama conferences, okay? It's not a thought they embrace. However, the reason I say it is really clear. It's because to understand what you people do with children, in order to understand music, children have to listen. And that concept of listening is potent universally. But I'm not going to go on about that because I said I wouldn't. My view is we should constantly hold ideals. So we should constantly strive for things to improve our circumstance and not dwell on the negatives. Keep moving forward, as they used to say in the Gill government, and keep changing our directions, or aware that our directions need to change and that we need to be active politically. Okay, now, advocacy is obviously a big part of that. So who are the best advocates? The best advocates are peers. Children are the best advocates for children. Are you in the choir? I go to choir with Miss McLaughlin. That's fantastic. You should be there. That's a child advocating for a child to go to Heather McLaughlin's choir. I go to Miriam Villa Voices with Michelle Leonard. She's crazy, but I love it. That's advocacy. Right? Parent advocating parent. Mother says, my son is learning music at school. What's your daughter do? Oh, they don't have music at her school. Really? That's very interesting because the enrolments at this school with the music are going up. That's interesting because the enrolments there are going down. Parent advocating for parent. Teacher advocating for teacher. Principal for principal. Because when I stand up at a principal's conference and say, principals, you should all be doing music, they say, yeah, well, stick it in your left nostril. We've got lots of other things to do. That doesn't carry any weight. Principals need to advocate for principles. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute when I talk about the mentoring program. And we are going to talk about advocacy sometime today, I know, aren't we, Brad? 2 o'clock. Okay. So, putting that sort of perspective on it, why is it in 2015 do we still have kids in this country who receive no music? And that's happening, it's true. We have kids who are getting no music. So we have to ask ourselves a whole lot of questions. What do we teach kids? Right? What do we teach kids? What constitutes a music program? What should be in that program that will hold kids' attention in music? Should we teach only pop music? And I know teachers who say, I teach pop music to my kids because they love it. But that's like saying I give chocolate to my children because they love it. There is nothing wrong with pop music, but there is more to music than pop music. So we should be aiming for a broad repertoire of stuff to teach children from which they learn about music. I'm going to give you an example. Recently, in the inner west in Sydney, I was working with a trio of so-called hip performers, historically informed performers, playing on original instruments. A violin, a 17th century violin, cello, and a classical clarinet. And we played Schubert, Mozart, and Beethoven trios to about 1,500 kids in the course of the week. We did 11 concerts. And the classes went from kindy right through to year 12. So we had large range. And it was very interesting because teachers said, I don't think we've invited you to the school because we think the children should have this experience, but we don't think they're going to be very interested in Schubert and Mozart and Beethoven. And I thought, fine. So it was not Schubert and Mozart and Beethoven they were interested in. It was the music. So when they heard the music, the kindy kids heard the music, they reacted immediately to the instruments. Once they'd heard the sound, we could engage them in questions about the sound. And they could answer lots of questions about what the cello did, about what the violin did, about what the clarinet did. And they could see numbers of the themes. So that program went right through to where we got to year 12, and we could talk about Schubert and Mozart and Beethoven and talk about differences in style. So it isn't the music that's the issue. It's how you teach it. And that all music will have some value somewhere that you are responsible for. That's what you have to decide. And to make sure the children get as broad and as rich a program in music as possible. And there's so much out there. So material is not an issue. There's repertoire for days. What are we really lacking? Teachers. We don't have enough teachers. It was in this room about 5 years ago, Parallel Conference, 3 years ago, it feels a long time as well. It was only 3 years ago, that I looked out onto this room and in the middle of an address, and I said, wouldn't it be amazing if we could harness all the energy in this room? Every teacher in this room became a mentor teacher and looked after other teachers. And that was the moment the mentoring program was born. And it's happening. We now have mentor teachers in New South Wales, Victoria, and WA. Some of you know about it because I've spoken about it at Maryborough or Oscar or wherever. But it works like this, and I think it's important for you to know. Each state has identified half a dozen or more teachers who have strengths in working with other teachers. In other words, they're strong mentors. And these schools have been invited to nominate teachers who would like to take part in the program. And what the program does is there's a program of vocal music which is taught along with conceptual material where the mentor teaches in front of the participating teacher. The participating teacher repeats that lesson and so on. And it shifts backwards and forwards between mentor and participating teacher. Now, later on today, Margaret Barrett and Bernadette McNamara are going to be talking about this. Bernadette is the national coordinator of the program, and Margaret's helping with research on this so we can get data, evidence that we can present to government. And already, the evidence that we're getting from programs that are coming in is very, very compelling. But it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise to know that in certain areas, school retention has improved. It's not a surprise to know that some children like to come to school on the day where there is music. That isn't a surprise to us. We know that. But does the general public know that? No. Do politicians necessarily know that? No. That's why we have to hold this advocacy at a political level. Is the mentoring system a panacea? Is it going to cure all music education problems in Australia? No. What will? I'll tell you what will. Nothing will replace... No, nothing. Nothing's not the answer. Nothing's not the answer. But it's a good start. Right. From nothing, we have to get better. Nothing will replace the idea of a thoroughly qualified, trained teacher in front of a group of children on a regular basis. Classroom teachers can assist, but in the end, we really want properly trained teachers. Now, the mentoring program is working. We know that. We have the evidence. We're starting to get the evidence. We've got it. And I'm hoping it will increase. It started because I got political. I went to Brandis and then I went to Christopher Pyne. I did. I had 15 minutes with Christopher Pyne. I had an hour with George Brandis because George was at that time the Arts Minister. He is no longer the Arts Minister and Pyne is no longer education. But that doesn't matter. The government which is funding the program is still in power. And so we have to re-lobby with Fifield and Armstrong. Okay, so we'll do that. I will go and see Fifield and I will go and see Armstrong. Unless you tell these people they don't know. They are not mind readers. Your local member needs to know. And I really believe that, guys. We don't play politics with them because they're better at it. We just tell them the same thing over and over and over until they repeat it. And then you say, what a good idea. And that's really how it works. Because they hear thousands of people. They have thousands of people wanting things. So this concept of advocacy and going to politicians is vital. So how do we do that nationally? Well, with ASME, I remember the first meeting of ASME in New South Wales, and it was in 1967 in August in the Sydney Teachers College Hall at the University of Sydney. And I went along because I was asked to provide some students to play original music at this particular opening of the ASME, beginning of ASME, the very, very first ASME ever. And it was very interesting because there were two people up for presidency. One was Terence Hunt, the Inspector of Schools in charge of music. That's what he called himself. And it wasn't a real title, but he made it up, which I thought was lovely. And he used to speak on occasions all the time and refer to himself as, I am Terence Hunt, Inspector of Schools in charge of music. And it sounded great. And people believed it. And it was powerful. It was advocacy. Apart from the fact that it was an ego trip, it was also advocacy. And the other person who was up for election was Professor Donald Peart, who was the foundation professor of music at Sydney University. He was the first music professor at Sydney Uni. So, the room was divided. There were the university types and there were the education types. As if university and education were mutually exclusive ideas. But when it came to music, they were. And I'll tell you why. Because the university people believed that in schools we weren't teaching music properly. We weren't teaching music the way they thought music should be taught. And the Department of Education believed that the university didn't have a clue about how you teach music. So there was already dispute at this incredibly narrow level. And as a young teacher, I found that really interesting. Because I started teaching in 63. So this is my 52nd year of working in education. And I still find it incredibly interesting. But we had a syllabus meeting about 2 years after the Wyndham syllabus came out, and Professor Pearce and Terry Hunt were there at the table about to rewrite the syllabus, rewrite ideas. And Terry Hunt said, I think the opening line of the syllabus should be, music is a language. And Professor Pearce jumped right in and said, oh, Terry, do you think so? How do you say I want a cup of tea in music? And Terry said, oh, for Christ's sake, shut up! So we were off to a lovely, healthy debate. And as a young teacher, I thought, this is fabulous. But I was on Pearce's side. How do you say, I want a cup of tea in music? And the answer is, you can't. And it's why we teach music. Because it's precisely not a language. Anyway, the election happened, and guess who became president? Donald Pearce. He became the New South Wales, first New South Wales, I think they called him chairman, or I can't remember what they called him then. And then Frank Callaway from the University of New South Wales became the first national president. So everyone looked to ASME. We all looked to ASME as being an association that would help us and represent us. And what happened? ASME lost its way. It really did. Because it became divisive. There was infighting, there was argument, who should teach what, who shouldn't do that, who shouldn't. And what had happened was the principal goal, the principal aim had been lost. It was not an Australian society for music education, it was an organisation for people to argue and infight. It was exactly that. And I know, because I went to lots of meetings. And then I stopped. Because I thought, this is pointless. And what was in Australia at the time? Nothing. Music Teachers Associations, MTAs, right? And I've looked at the history of the MTAs all over the country. They were there, and they were doing really good work. Music Teachers Associations were having summer schools. They were talking about how do you teach the 5th grade syllabus, right? How do you teach oral training? How do you teach children general knowledge? It was stuff that studio teachers really wanted to know about. They were incredibly useful. Then, what happened in the late 60s and early 70s, associations began to evolve with particular methods. So we had the Orff Association, the Kodai Association, the Suzuki Association, the Yamaha Association. All of these organisations started to emerge. And we saw in Australia a massive change philosophically. People started to advocate for particular methodologies. So you had Orff fanatics, Kodai fanatics, Suzuki fanatics, and unless you were doing Orff exactly the way Orff prescribed it, which is interesting because he didn't prescribe anything, you weren't an Orff teacher. And unless you were doing Kodai going, hello, how are you, lovely day, nice to see you, you weren't a Kodai teacher. And all of that stuff happened. And we fought. And we argued. And it was all silly. It was all silly. Then we had, there's only one way to teach the violin, Suzuki. Every other violin method out the window. So what happened was, Suzuki alienated rafts of string teachers who had been trained in European traditions, who understood the way the Russians, for example, teach, the way the Germans teach, the way Hungarians teach. So that was all alienated. And so what grew up in Australia was a series of islands. So we have all of these associations. But they are inherently good because they all have one thing in mind, music. They're all united by the idea of music. They all contain good people. They all contain passionate teachers. They all have people who are committed to the idea of music education. And they fight for their beliefs, and they fight for their principles, and they fight for their ideals, and they go to conferences, and they become part of the faithful, and they evangelise, and all that stuff. That is, in essence, good. It's good. And it shouldn't stop. Because it promotes debate. It promotes argument. It promotes thought. And in Australia, I think we're changing where we can actually say, I think I do this from Keynote, I do this from Orff, I do this dark prose. I love this bit about dark prose. And I love this little bit where they do this in Suzuki, and I love what they do here. So as eclectic teachers, we can take the best of all of these things and make them our own. We don't want to be like Orff teachers in Salzburg. We don't want to be like Hungarian teachers. We'd like to have their skills and their abilities and all the fabulous things they can do musically. But we have the capacity in this country to have the best of every world. We have that capacity. And that capacity, ladies and gentlemen, resides in ASME. I am proposing today that ASME work as hard as it can at the national level to establish a corporate membership for every music association and society in the country, so that every music association, every society, everybody from the partially left-handed nose flute players to Yamaha and music industry join ASME. Why? Because as a united force, all of these associations under the umbrella of ASME would be a powerful force at government level. It would represent roughly 3 million Australians, constantly growing. Because when you look at the teachers, the number of children doing music, the number of associations there are, the numbers of families that are involved, that's a very big number. That's a lot of people for a politician to hear, Minister, 3 million people in your constituency happen to think this is important. I'm sure you'll agree, given there's an election coming up. That's all we have to say. That's all we have to say. Because if we don't, other people will. Drama people, visual arts people, they will. The drama people are unstoppable. So we have to become unstoppable. In promoting the idea that all associations should be umbrellaed by ASME, I am not promoting the concept that the associations change their nature. Is that clear? In other words, if you are a dyed-in-the-wool Kodai person or off person, you don't have to stop that. Your association just becomes a member, a corporate member of ASME. And it may meet from time to time with ASME to discuss issues of advocacy. But what I'm talking about is an advocacy issue. I'm saying that if we entrust ASME with the charter it really was supposed to do, which was the Australian Society, listen to those words, guys, Australian, that's us, society, everybody, isn't it? Say yes. Yes. For music education. Everybody. You don't have to change beliefs. You don't have to be baptised. You don't have to have a brain operation, like becoming a national. You've just got to be a corporate member. And as a corporate member, we then charge ASME with advocating on our behalf for the very best things in music education. We maintain our individuality because as musicians, that's what we're supposed to be about. Individuals. Isn't that the case? Yes, of course it is. When you teach children to compose, which is the reason we teach music, we're teaching them to be individuals. We don't want them to lose their individuality. It's one of the great things about music education, that each child will have a very different idea of how they compose. I know that from having done a big session recently in Sydney where we had 4 new Australian works by young composers, really good pieces, played by contemporary ensembles, and 35 works from year 9 and 10 kids played by these ensembles. Now, Deborah was there at this particular event, and she will testify to the 35 works that were played were all different. Every single one. One work came from a year 9 boy in Blacktown. Now, Blacktown is way out in the west. It's not the cultural centre of Sydney by a long chalk. And this kid said, I have written a string quartet. And it's called String Quartet Number 1 because it is my first. And this string quartet player, and I'm here to tell you, I looked at the composer and I said, that's the real McCoy. That's a Thomas Artes. That's a Harrison Birtwistle. This kid was amazing. And these emerging composers looked a little bit embarrassed at hearing a year 9 kid writing sophisticated music, incredibly sophisticated music. Now, how exciting is that? So, we know what music can do. We know what it can do for children. But we need to protect it. Because, guys, we are under threat. The arts do not work well together. They will only work well together when we are united. Everyone's fighting for the same pie. And we are fighting for the same pie because it's called the arts. That was the sellout. Once we became the arts, we lost something. We lost our integrity a little bit. It was good as music. It was good as visual arts. But when it became the arts, what happened? Oh, it can all be done the same way. We even had syllabus meetings where people said, let's find a common language for the arts. How about let's not? How about let's find in all of those things which are special to music and hanging on to those and saying, while we might have certain things in common with dance and drama and visual arts, we are quintessentially unique. That's what we have to protect. Now the dancers and the dramas and the painters, they'll say, so are we. And I'll say, good. Fight your own battles. We need to fight ours. And we do need that, guys. We really, really need it. And we need to become political. Because when we deal with children, and we deal with music and children, we go in to the deepest part of the mind. The most extraordinary part of the mind. So when children hear music and react to music, listen to music, singing together, children singing together, how potent is that? And the effect that can have on children. And we can see it. You watch Michelle's program, the Mirabella Voices program, Gondwana kids. I've worked with the Gondwana kids. They're serious. They are really serious. Because having fun in music is serious. We need to get serious with music education. We've got lots of people doing things out there helping music education. But we need to get serious. We need to teach children as much about music as we can. I recently talked with a teacher who said, I have survived teaching music and I do not read a note. And I said, that is not something of which I would be proud. Well, it's not. So how does that teacher handle a band? If we get to that level where it's about fun, engagement, all those lovely words we have now, engagement, do you like that one? Director of engagement. Does that mean endless fiancés? I mean, what does that really mean? We want to teach music properly. That's what we really want to do. And we want to make sure that kids have access to this because of what it does for their hearts, their minds, and their souls, their spirits, and their imagination. And the music does it differently from all the other arts. And this wonderful, wonderful philosopher, Iris Murdoch, whom I quote regularly when talking about education, said, education does not make you happy, nor does freedom. We don't become happy just because we are educated, if we are, or because we are free, if we are. But education may be the means by which we realise we are happy and may provide us with the information to know that the only freedom worth having is the freedom of the mind. The freedom of the mind to engage, to wander, to explore. Michel Montaigne says similar things. If the mind ceases to be engaged, we're dead. And that which acts upon the mind of a child potently is music. And it acts on the mind of the child from birth, even before. And it's why ladies and gentlemen, I'm really serious about suggesting to you that ASME find a way to unite everybody in this country, become the real peak body, and advocate as powerfully as possible for music education. Thank you.